The marble floors gleamed beneath his shoes. Click, click. Each step was deliberate, polished, quietly powerful. Malcolm Reed didn't walk like a man who needed permission. He walked like someone who had already earned it. The morning crowd rushed around him. Interns juggling coffee trays, analysts with too much paper and not enough sleep, executives glued to their phones pretending to be more important than they actually were. But Malcolm, he just moved. Sharp charcoal suit, no tie. Black, coat draped over his arm, no entourage, no briefcase. Just a phone in one hand and a presence that said everything else. He stepped into the lobby of Langford Industries, 38 stories of cold steel and ambition. A receptionist sat at the front desk. Blonde bob. Perfect red lipstick. Name tag that. Read, Jessica. She was mid-laugh, scrolling her phone when she noticed him walking toward her. Her eyes flicked up, one glance. That was all it took, a slight pause in her expression. A shift in posture. The smile faded. "Excuse me," Malcolm said, calm and polite. "I'm here to access the 38th floor. Executive offices." Jessica didn't blink. Instead, she tilted her head with a small smirk. "The 38th floor?" she repeated slowly. He nodded once. She looked him over, head to toe, clean cut, well-dressed, confident, but black and not familiar. "Are you with maintenance?" she asked. Malcolm gave the smallest shake of his head. "No." She tried again. "Catering? Security audit?" "No," Malcolm said again, voice steady. "I'm here for a meeting." Jessica straightened her back, folded her hands. "I see. And do you have an appointment?" "I do." "With?" He paused, just for a second. "I don't need a name, just access to the executive suite." Jessica gave a tight smile, the kind people wear when they think they have more authority than they do. "Sir, if you don't have a point of contact, I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside the lobby." He blinked once. "I'd prefer not to." She raised a brow. "And I'd prefer not to call security. But I will if I have to." Malcolm looked down for a moment, checked the time on his phone. 16 m. He looked back up at her. "You're sure about that?" She folded her arms. "I am." He let out a quiet sigh. Then he took one step back, away from the desk, reached for his phone, typed a message with one hand. "Ready, let's begin." Then he looked up at her one last time. Calm, measured, and said, "Thank you for the warm welcome." Then he turned around and walked out of the building. No yelling, no frustration, no second glance. Just that same quiet power, moving towards something she would never see coming. Before the marble floors, before the glass towers, before the receptionist who saw only skin, not story. There was Detroit, not the polished skyline, not the tech startups, but the side where streetlights flickered and ambition was something you had to fight for. Malcolm grew up in a one-bedroom apartment off 7 Mile, 5th floor. Peeling walls, a mama who worked 3 jobs and still made time to iron his shirts for school. He was the quiet kid, the one in the back of the classroom, scribbling in notebooks while the others joked about sneakers and mixtapes. But he wasn't. Drawing cartoons, he was designing businesses. At 12, he was building fantasy companies on graph paper. At 14, he was reading investment books from the library 2 blocks away. At 15, he memorized every Fortune 500 CEO. None of them looked like him, so he made a promise to himself. If they won't make room, I'll build the damn table. By 18, he had 2 scholarships, turned them both down. Went straight to MIT, majored in applied mathematics and economics. Graduated top of his class, then Stanford for his MBA, where he launched his first real startup from a borrowed dorm laptop. It failed. So did the next one, and the next. But failure didn't scare him. Being ignored did, so he kept building. By the time he turned 35, Malcolm Reed was the founder and CEO of Red River Ventures, one of the fastest-growing private equity firms on the East Coast. He wasn't flashy, didn't chase headlines, but behind the scenes, he had rebuilt portfolios, saved companies, grown brands from the ashes of their own arrogance. And 2 months ago, he closed the deal that would change everything. He bought a controlling interest in Langford Industries, the very company that just kicked him out of its lobby. He hadn't announced the buyout publicly yet. It was a strategic silence. He wanted to walk through that building as a stranger first, to see how they treated people without titles, without name tags, without power on their sleeve. He didn't expect the test to happen that quickly, but now that it had, it told him everything he needed to know. Sitting in the back of his car, parked just across the street, Malcolm scrolled through his phone. He wasn't looking at the stock market. He was looking at personnel files. "Jessica, last name?" he asked. His assistant's voice came through the speaker. "Jessica Rowan, front desk, 12 years. Any complaints?" 3. All buried. 2 for inappropriate assumptions, 1 for tone toward clients. All dismissed by the previous HR director. Malcolm nodded. Noted. Then he adjusted his cufflinks, looked at the time. 23 a.m. "Move the meeting to the lobby," he said, "and tell the board I'm coming in through the front door again." Because the thing about Malcolm Reed, he didn't knock twice. He knocked once, and if you didn't open the door, he bought the whole building. The black SUV sat idle across the street, engine low, windows tinted. Inside, Malcolm Reed sat perfectly still. The city moved around him, horns, crosswalks, footsteps, but in his mind, everything was quiet, focused, measured. He stared out the window, at the very building that just turned him away. It looked different now, not intimidating, not majestic, just vulnerable. He reached for his phone, tapped once. His assistant picked up immediately. "Malcolm? Jessica Rowan, receptionist, get me everything." "Already done," she replied. 3 HR complaints, all filed by people of color, all unresolved. "Buried?" Conveniently. He nodded. "Pull security footage, this morning, lobby. I want her words on tape." "Already in the drive," she said. He smiled slightly. "Efficiency. That's why he hired her. And tell legal I want a clause review. Every employment contract. Every executive on floors 30 to 40. His tone sharpened. "If there's anyone else in that company who acts like her, I want their names before lunch." Then he swiped to a group chat. Langford Transition Team. Private. Town hall moved to lobby. 10 a.m., no delay, no filter, announce it now. Seconds later, a company-wide internal message lit up every employee's screen in the building. Mandatory meeting, 10 a.m. Lobby, all departments. Attendance required. Executive announcement. Malcolm checked the time, 41 a.m. He leaned back in his seat, closed his eyes for a moment. He wasn't angry. Anger was inefficient. He was ready. Back inside Langford Industries, the lobby began to buzz. Emails were being read. Chats pinged. Employees started glancing at each other. Town hall? In the lobby? "Since when do execs come down?" Jessica glanced up from her desk, confused. She hadn't been told anything. A group of department heads exited the elevators in a small wave. More people began gathering. Whispers circled, tension rising like steam in a closed room. Then the elevator bell dinged, and out stepped Malcolm Reed. This time through the front doors. No pass, no announcement, no one to stop him. Because now, he didn't need permission. He was the permission. He walked across the lobby, the same marble that saw him dismissed just 40 minutes earlier. But this time, every footstep had weight. Purpose and eyes followed him, not with judgment but with something new, recognition. Jessica stood up as he approached the front desk. Her face went pale. I thought you left," she said. He stopped just short of the desk, looked her dead in the eyes, and calmly replied, "You did. But the owner of this company hasn't arrived. Until now." The room fell silent. Even the elevators seemed to stop humming. Malcolm adjusted the cuff of his shirt, turned to face the growing crowd and said, "Let's begin." The lobby was full now. Crowded shoulders, low murmurs. Phone screens dimmed, attention rising. No one knew what exactly this was about, only that it came from the top. And the top was now standing right in front of them. Malcolm Reed, composed, silent, in control of the very air in the room. He stepped forward. A microphone had been set up. Someone from HR had grabbed it in a panic minutes earlier. But he didn't use it. He didn't need to. His voice carried not through volume, but presence. "Good morning," he began, slow and clear. "Some of you may not know me. Others might have Googled me in the last 5 minutes. A few awkward chuckles. He let them die. My name is Malcolm Reed, and as of 6 weeks ago, became the majority shareholder of Langford Industries." Silence. Dead center silence. A few mouths fell slightly open. Someone in the back whispered, "He owns us?" Malcolm continued. "I had planned to introduce myself next week, at a scheduled, polished, fully branded executive event. The usual corporate theater." He paused. "But this morning, your company gave me something more valuable than a stage." He turned slightly, scanning the crowd. "It gave me the truth." He walked slowly to one side of the lobby, not pacing, commanding. "This morning I walked through these doors as a man, polite, respectful. Early, I approached your front desk. I asked for access to the 38th floor. I was not wearing a name tag. I was not surrounded by assistants or security or a press team." He stopped. "I was treated like a threat." Jessica froze behind the desk. No one looked at her, but she felt every eye leaning in her direction, was spoken to with condescension, dismissed without a question, told to use the side entrance, told to wait outside. He took a breath. I wasn't angry. I was informed. And now, the shift in the room was palpable. This wasn't just about race, it was about pattern. How many of them had felt that tone before, heard that gatekeeping silence, and how many had just learned to live with it? Malcolm let the pause hang. Then, he stepped back to center. "I didn't build Red River Ventures by accident. I didn't come from privilege. I came from strategy, discipline, and the deep understanding that power is rarely given. It's taken when earned." He locked eyes with the crowd. "And now that I hold the power here, I intend to use it, a beat." Then, he pointed to the elevator behind him. "I won't be starting my leadership on the 38th floor. I'll be starting it right here, on the ground floor, where the culture actually lives." A few heads nodded, then more. Someone clapped, just once, but it was enough to start a ripple. Malcolm didn't smile. He didn't need applause. He just nodded slightly and said, "Today the real work begins." Behind him, Jessica stood frozen. No one said her name, but her silence was louder than any mic. She wasn't being humiliated. She was being held accountable. And Malcolm, he wasn't finished. He was just getting warmed up. The applause faded, but the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged, tense. Like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Malcolm Reed stood tall, calm in the center of the lobby. No slides, no boardroom, no PR team in his ear. Just truth and the attention of an entire company hanging on his every word. He reached into the inside pocket of his blazer, pulled out a thin black folder, unsnapped it with a soft click. "This," he said, holding it up, "is your culture audit." He flipped it open, scanned a page. In the past 5 years, Langford Industries has received over 93 internal complaints related to bias, discrimination, or workplace retaliation. Murmurs rippled through the room. Malcolm raised a hand. "I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to reveal what's been tolerated." He flipped to another page. Out of 27 executive-level promotions in that time, only 2 went to candidates of color. And none to black women. Now people were whispering out loud. Some looked down. Others looked straight at him, but no one looked away. Departments that perform well are underfunded. Voices that challenge the norm are ignored. And too often, perception has mattered more than performance. He looked over to the side of the room. Someone in HR tried to shrink into the wall. He didn't call them out. Didn't need to. The numbers already had. Malcolm flipped the folder shut. "This morning I was stopped in your lobby. Not because of protocol. Not because of safety, but because of assumption. And assumption is the first cousin of bias. He let that line land. Hard. Then, finally, he turned toward the front desk. Jessica stood there, frozen. She looked like someone waiting for a sentence she couldn't escape. Malcolm didn't raise his voice. He didn't say her name. He simply looked in her direction and spoke with grace sharpened like steel. I believe in accountability, not humiliation. But what happened this morning was not just unprofessional, it was cultural. And culture begins here. He turned to his chief of staff, standing nearby. Ms. Rowan is to be placed on administrative leave, effective immediately, full. Review pending. Jessica's lips parted. She wanted to speak, but no words came out. Malcolm nodded once, then looked back to the crowd. I want you all to know, he said, this company is not being punished. It's being reset. A few heads nodded again. Stronger this time. He stepped forward. I don't care what department you're in, how long you've been here, or where you came from. If you lead with respect, you'll rise. If you don't, you won't last. The room was dead still. People weren't just hearing him, they were feeling him. And for the first time in that building's history, the most powerful man in the company wasn't hiding behind a glass wall or boardroom table. He was right there, feet on the same marble floor as everyone else, telling the truth, owning the room, changing the temperature of the air itself. And he wasn't done, because this was only day one. The crowd hadn't moved. No one was checking their phone. No one was pretending to look busy. Because in that moment, every employee in the lobby knew this wasn't a speech, this was a shift, and Malcolm Reed wasn't here to impress them. He was here to rebuild the ground they were standing on. He took one step forward, voice steady, eyes locked on the people in front of him. You've just heard the audit. You've seen the numbers. Now let me show you the plan. He nodded to his assistant, who stepped forward and handed him a small remote, a sleek black projector, clicked on behind him, casting a clean screen against the marble wall. Slide 1, Culture Reset Protocol. Phase 1. First, Malcolm said, we are launching an independent third-party equity investigation. No more internal reports. Getting buried. No more retaliation masked as restructuring. Slide 2, Leadership Review. Every executive director, department heads, team leads, managers will undergo a 360-degree cultural competency review. Anonymous input from staff will matter. And promotions won't just be about profits. They'll be about how you lead humans. Slide 3, Rehiring the Overlooked. This building lost talent, real talent, because it refused to listen, because some of you decided who was worthy before they ever spoke. He looked around the room. And that ends now. He paused on the next slide. A single name appeared. Tamika Johnson, former senior analyst, rehired. A woman standing near the back gasped. All heads turned. She raised her hand slightly, tears in her eyes. Malcolm smiled. You were passed over. 3 times for promotion. They told you to be patient, then gave the role to someone who had never worked a day in your department. He nodded. You start Monday. The room erupted in quiet applause. A few people teared up. One whispered, it's real. Slide 4, Pay Equity Audit. Starting this quarter, Langford will implement transparent pay band reporting, visible to all staff. Discrepancies will be reviewed, explained or corrected. Slide 5, The Listening Wall. Malcolm turned off the projector. I don't want your silence. I want your voice. We're installing a digital listening wall. Anonymous, real-time. Input, open 24/7. No names, no fear, just truth. And I'll read it every week, personally. He took a breath, let the words sink into the marble, the air, the hearts in that room. Then he looked back to the receptionist's desk, empty now. Jessica had been escorted out minutes ago, not to be shamed, but to be reminded there are consequences. And now, there's accountability. Malcolm clasped his hands behind his back. This lobby, this floor, isn't just where you walk in. It's where culture starts. So starting today, this is our real headquarters. He turned, looked up at it. The floors above. All of that, he said, gesturing upward. We earned that, down here. And just like that, he walked away. No music, no applause, just footsteps on marble, and the feeling that something real had just begun. 3 weeks later. The building felt different. It still looked the same. Same steel beams, same marble lobby, same elevator chime. But the energy, unmistakably new. There was something in the air now. Something you couldn't touch. But you could feel. People walked a little straighter, talked a little braver, and looked each other in the eye with something that had been missing for years. Respect. Malcolm had kept his promise. He didn't disappear into a corner office on the top floor. He stayed close, visible, accessible. Every Monday morning at 8 a.m. he stood in the lobby just for 15 minutes, no speech, no formalities, just there, holding coffee, asking questions, listening. How's the new onboarding process? Did they fix the outdated pay scale in finance? Who here hasn't been given credit lately? At first people were cautious, then curious, then completely open, because when leadership listens consistently, truth stops hiding. Tamika Johnson, the analyst who'd been rehired, was now heading a mentorship program called Level Up, connecting entry-level hires with seasoned professionals across departments. Applications doubled in a week. A conference room on the second floor had been renamed the Listening Room. Glass walls, notebooks, sticky notes, and one rule: you can talk here and someone will follow up. The anonymous digital listening wall. It was working. One note had read, "Our sales department hasn't promoted a woman in 3 years." Next day, that department got a visit by the CEO. But the most remarkable change? The silence was gone. Not the peaceful kind, the toxic kind, the one where people keep their heads down, their ideas in, and their courage buried. Now people spoke up, not to complain, but to build. Malcolm called a full staff meeting, not into a conference room, in the lobby, again, because as he said, you can't claim transparency if you keep running upstairs. He stepped up on a small stage, no screen, no podium, just him, and said, 3 weeks ago this company was operating on assumption. Now we operate on accountability. 3 weeks ago only a few voices were heard. Now we're building a choir. He paused, scanned the room. Some were new hires. Some were veterans. All were leaning in. The old culture relied on fear of being replaced. The new one will be built on the hope of being respected. Someone clapped. Then more, not loud, not forced, just real. And that was all Malcolm needed. He stepped down, blended into the crowd. Because culture isn't about who gets the mic, it's about who finally gets to speak. The set was clean, minimalist, sleek gray tones, soft lighting, polished glass table. Behind the host, a screen showed bold white letters. The reckoning of corporate power, one CEO's quiet uprising. Across from her sat Malcolm Reed. No tie, no script, just presence, and a stillness that said you don't need to shout when you stand on truth. The host leaned forward. Her tone was respectful, but edged with curiosity. Mr. Reed, in just 4 weeks, you've turned Langford Industries into the most talked-about company in the country. You've been called a disruptor, a reformer, even a corporate revolutionary. Why now? Why this company? Malcolm smiled faintly. I didn't pick Langford for headlines, he said. I picked it because it looked just like every other building that told people like me we weren't supposed to be at the top floor. The host raised an eyebrow. Was this so personal? He nodded, but not in the way people think. I didn't walk in with anger. I walked in with clarity. She leaned back. Let's talk about the moment that started it all. The lobby, the receptionist, the assumption. Malcolm stayed still for a beat, then said, I wasn't surprised. That's the saddest part. He looked directly into the camera now, eyes unwavering. Every black professional has a lobby story. A moment when someone looked at your skin before your credentials, your clothes before your competence, your presence before your purpose. The room went quiet, even behind the camera, because he wasn't performing, he was testifying. The host shifted in her chair. What happened to that receptionist? Malcolm didn't blink. She was given a review, a chance to learn, and a choice. I don't believe in canceling people. I believe in confronting them with the mirror they've avoided for too long. Some break it, some clean it. The host nodded slowly. And what do you say to critics who claim this is all PR, that it's about image, not change? Malcolm chuckled, then leaned in. Culture is not a press release. It's what people whisper when the door closes. And I want our whispers to sound like equity, not fear. The final question came, direct, powerful. What does success look like to you now? Malcolm paused, then answered. It looks like a young black man walking into a building like Langford and being asked, how can we help you succeed? Not, why are you here? It looks like an assistant being treated like a future CEO, not a coffee machine. It looks like dignity without negotiation. The host sat back, visibly moved. She looked into the camera. Malcolm Reed, thank you for your leadership. And your courage. He nodded once, not as a bow, but as an invitation. Backstage, his phone buzzed. A message from his mother. Just 3 words. I see you. And somehow, that meant more than all the headlines combined. The house was quiet. No meetings, no strategy calls, no calendar reminders buzzing in his pocket. Just Malcolm, in his favorite chair, on the back porch of a house he'd bought for his mother 15 years ago. The city was behind him now, in front of him. Trees, the wind, and the rhythmic creak of an old wooden swing slowly drifting under the porch light. He held a cup of tea. No coffee, no whiskey, just quiet warmth. Something about this place always made him smaller in the right way, like stripping off the weight of titles, press, and expectations, till he was just Malcolm again, the boy from 7 Mile, the chess kid, the dreamer who wrote fake business plans in pencil on the back of grocery receipts. Inside, his mother hummed gospel. Not loud, just enough to fill the cracks in the silence. Then, she stepped outside, wrapped in her thick gray cardigan, the one with sleeves always a little too long. She sat across from him, didn't say anything for a while. She never rushed conversations. She just waited for the moment to breathe in, and then she asked softly, "How's your heart?" Malcolm stared into his cup, not because he didn't know the answer, but because it felt safe to say it here. Tired, he admitted, but full. She nodded. You finally did it. He looked up. Did what? She smiled, that knowing. Smile only mothers have. You didn't just take the seat, baby. You changed what it means to sit in it. He blinked slowly. Her words wrapped around him like a second coat. They sat in silence again, as cicadas buzzed softly in the distance. Then, she said, you remember what I told you when you were 13? After that guidance counselor told you you'd be better off skipping college and learning a trade? He smirked. Yeah. You said, boy, you better make them choke on that sentence one day. She laughed, belly deep. I did say that, didn't I? He raised his glass, to choking politely. She reached over and held his hand. Her fingers were smaller now, older, but still strong, still steady. You were never meant to blend in, Malcolm. That's why they stared. But now they listen. He looked at her, the woman who used to clean hotel bathrooms and come home with swollen feet, but still managed to iron his shirt, and quiz him on vocabulary for spelling bees. She was his first boardroom, his first mentor, his first believer. And now, sitting here, he realized she wasn't just proud of what he did. She was proud of how he did it. They sat together until the moon rose high above the treetops, until the tea turned cold, until all the applause, articles, and interviews faded, and all that was left was love. The stage wasn't grand, no spotlight, no orchestra swell, just a mid-sized conference room in Langford Industries, filled with folding chairs and folding arms. It was the company's annual mentorship summit, an event that used to be optional. This year, it was packed, and not because it was mandatory, but because they wanted to be there. Something had changed. The energy was no longer fear-driven. It was purpose-led. Malcolm stood near the back of the room, not on stage, not holding a mic, just watching. Beside him stood Tamika Johnson, now promoted again, this time to Director of People and Equity. She whispered, "You sure you don't want to speak?" He smiled. "I already did." Up front, a young man was at the podium, 24, fresh suit, nervous hands, a recent hire. He cleared his throat. "My name is Marcus, and when I walked into this building 3 months ago, I didn't know if I was supposed to speak up or just survive." He looked down, then back up. "But then I met a mentor who told me something I'll never forget." He glanced over at Tamika. She said, "Don't spend your career shrinking to fit in. Grow until the room has no choice but to expand." Applause. Not loud, but real. Malcolm felt something shift in his chest, a weight finally lifting because he knew in that moment he didn't have to be the voice anymore. The echo had become its own song. After the summit, Malcolm walked the halls one last time before his next flight. He passed desks filled with people who looked like possibility, people laughing, collaborating, owning their space. No one flinched when he walked by. No one stood to impress. They just nodded, because now, he wasn't just their CEO, he was their standard. At the elevator, he paused. Same marble floor, same polished steel doors. He pressed the button, watched it glow. Before it opened, he looked back once, at the lobby where it all began, and said quietly to himself, "Never had to raise my voice, just raised the floor." Weeks later, a plaque appeared in that very lobby. No portraits, no gilded frame. Just 6 simple words etched in black steel. "Respect is the new company policy." Signed, MR and maybe, years from now, when a young black man in a hoodie walks in, when a woman with braids and ambition steps through the door, when someone who doesn't look the part dares to walk like they belong. They won't have to prove it, because Malcolm already did. The end.